Hello everybody and welcome back to Star Trek Online. We're here with another perfectly unscientific gaming review. Normally, of course, we focus on the science side of things, but this ship came out last week and it is truly astounding in terms of what it offers up for somebody wanting to build, let's just say, an engineer tank. It can, of course, be used for other things, but I just wanted to talk about the concept of a miracle worker tank that this ship brings forward. So the Discovery Constitution or Enterprise fits this bill perfectly, and we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Well, first of all, it's a cruiser with a good amount of HP. It also, of course, is a flight deck cruiser, which means it sports the Attract Fire command. But the thing that's making this work for us is the Miracle Worker specialization. So let's just have a look at that right now. So starting off in terms of why we're wanting to use Miracle Worker, it comes down to three things. One, we're lacking critical chance. Two, we need to stay alive, and with an engineer, any kind of damage buff we can get is very nice. So starting off, the first point of Miracle Worker that is very nice is Embolden. And what this does is whenever we activate a hull heal, it's just a flat plus 2% critical chance, and this refreshes the duration every time we activate hull heals. And being a tank, we're going to be doing that quite a bit, so this is effectively 2% free critical chance. The next thing that we should talk about with the Miracle Worker specialization is throw out the manual, and what this does is it increases our heal critical chance, and this wasn't a thing until Miracle Worker came out. You'll see it says by default healing critical severity is 50% and your heal critical chance is 0%. So by taking Miracle Worker, we're getting a plus 20% heal critical chance, and this means that when we activate things like our Miraculous Repairs, this can easily crit for upwards of 50, 60, sometimes even 70,000. So it's pretty fun. Next one is Fix 'em Up. Whenever you use a heal, you just get a flat all damage resistance rating. This helps, so we don't need to take as many nodes of that in the skill tree, or even from the reputation system or traits or consoles. Next up is No Risk, No Reward, and this one is a big one. What this one does is whenever we're hit by a critical hit or a critical heal, we get 10% incoming healing, an extra 10% incoming healing, and an extra 10% bonus all damage, which of course is Cat 2, which is the kind that, just the way the damage formulas work out, magnifies damage a whole lot more than just standard plus all damage buffs do. And for more on that, maybe that's something we can look at later, but suffice to say, bonus all damage is going to do more for us than just plus all damage, and you'll note that this can stack up to 3 times, so for an additional plus 30% bonus all Cat 2 damage. The next one is Tough Little Ship, and this softens the blows when we get hit by critical hits, and if you're playing advanced or elite content, or even just running the Borg advanced TFOs, you're going to want this, as they can hit you pretty hard, and with that, this just softens the blow when you're hit by a critical hit. Then finally, Give Her All She's Got, and this is something that is kind of like Engineering Fleet. You can toggle back and forth between them. This one gives us plus 20 all damage resistance rating to subsystem offline duration, plus 20% turn rate, plus 20% incoming healing, and plus 20% max hull points. I like to toggle them with Engineering Fleet. So why the Discovery Enterprise? Well, this ship fits the build superbly. It's a flight deck cruiser, meaning, of course, it has the Attract Fire command. It also has enough bridge officer slots to run some of the common tank bridge officer setups and bridge officer powers. It, of course, also features both the Miracle Worker seat and the command seat as well, and it has 2 hangar bays with some of the most interesting hangar pets that we've seen come into game with these. And what they did with these is they made it so that when you're launching these pets, they will effectively auto-launch. So before we get too far into this setup, let's just have a look at how the ship ran with these pets in a Japuri system patrol. All right, we're back. So let's have a look at the bridge officer setup that's available on the ship. We have a Commander Engineering Miracle Worker seat. We have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical seat, a Lieutenant Commander Universal, a Lieutenant Universal Command, and an Ensign Science seat. And you'll note that this is a bit of an interesting setup because it has both Miracle Worker and Command, which are two of the things you want if you're going to be tanking. And I think the idea when Cryptic built the ship is that they wanted to put forward one of the best tanking platforms that's out there, though I will admit that I found it a bit awkward trying to utilize both the Miracle Worker and the Command seating at the same time while slotting the heals that I normally would like to bring. You might not need all of these, but I brought them anyways. And of course, also slotting the attack pattern delta and attack pattern beta, which are common in tank setups. So let's have a look at what I'm running. Let's just start off at the simplest down here. We have in our Ensign Science just a standard Hazard Emitters Bridge Officer ability, which is going to give us 8.6k health over 15 seconds. Then our Lieutenant Commander Engineer Universal is set up primarily for healing with Engineering Team 1, Aux to Structural Integrity Field 1, and Reverse Shield Polarity 2. Then in our Lieutenant Universal, this is where we're running a tactical and just standard tac team and attack pattern delta. And you'll note when we go over the Starship traits why we're running delta. But as it is right now, on its own, delta gives you a nice damage buff and debuffs anyone who hits you. Fire at Will 1, because when this build was recorded, you had to use Fire at Will 1 in order to get Fire at Will 3 on the new Phaser Beam Arrays, Attack Pattern Beta 1, and Torpedo Spread 3. Then in our Engineering seat, Emergency Power to Engines, just to initiate the cooldown of evasive maneuvers, which you'll see in the Duty Officer section with our Con Officer. Narrow Sensor Bands, which is one of the Miracle Worker abilities, and what this does is that the closer you are to your target, you get a scaling damage buff based on distance, so plus 35% if you're really close and 15% if you're at 6 kilometers away. And you'll note it says, of course, bonus energy weapon damage, so that is, of course, Cat 2, and that is immaculate. Then Emergency Power to Weapons 3, and Mixed Armament Synergy 3, which gives us a plus 50% bonus all damage whenever we fire one of our other weapon types. So we fire off a torpedo, then all of our beams will get buffed as well. Now, given the way this is set up, I think we could throw this out to the community and ask if there's any other potential ideas out there of what might be run as a good tank setup on this ship. That's something I'd be certainly open to hearing in the comments below, so let us know what you think. Equipment-wise on this ship, for the torpedo, we could have run the default torpedo that it came with if we were going for the true look setup on that. Otherwise, we're just running a standard quantum phase torpedo, and the reason for that is because we get a bit of shield drain when we're using this two-piece set under torpedo spread, and you'll note that in the parse that our shield drain on this is actually fairly high. Then this is something that came out with these ships, and these are the new advanced phaser beam arrays. I know there's a bit of community controversy if they should have put something like this on the ship, because this has double the activation chance of the normal effects on beam arrays, but as you equip more of these, you get a scaling damage buff, and you'll note again that it is that key word, bonus damage, so that's Cat 2, so you get 5% chance for a plus 60% bonus damage with these beam arrays for 15 seconds, and that's quite a bit, and that's of course a topic for another day. Deflector wise, the deflector from the colony, the intervention protomatter deflector with our call crit, which gives us critical chance and critical severity, which, as we mentioned, of course, as you can see, this is an engineer, so that is needed on this run. Engine wise, we use this one so that it cools down our tactical abilities, but when we're moving around, it also reduces, or rather makes our ship run a bit faster and effectively as a pocket evasive maneuvers. This is the standard Spire warp core that's just been in use for many years on most of my energy weapon builds, and it's not much to write home about there. And then the shield is the Innervated Resilient Shield Array, which, when we are hit by energy weapons, has a chance to increase our critical chance and critical severity, also giving us a 2-piece buff to hull capacity control and critical chance. Then I'll just run through each of these consoles down here. Vulnerability locator in our universal slot for phaser damage and critical chance. Then down here, colony tactical consoles for more phaser damage and a chance to heal ourselves, and you'll see that in the parse. Some critical severity and hull capacity. Timeline stabilizer to cool down our bridge officer and captain abilities. The DPRM, Dynamic Power Redistributor module, a very popular console that acts as a heal and also gives us plus 40% Cat 2 bonus damage when we're above 80% hull. Secondary shields, completing the 2-piece of the set, it's effectively a pocket reverse shield polarity, but it's also giving us plus 33% phaser damage. Then the console from the ship, which will buff our carrier pets and launch 4 more tactical fighter squadrons, and this buffs all our pets to have a plus 25% bonus all damage resistance rating. Then the science consoles, a hull repairing weapon signature amplifier with Drain X increases our threat gen and adds a bit of drain to our ship, which is the skill to go with because that of course buffs things like our Nadion inversion. Some more drain on the quantum phase converter and phaser damage as well, completing that 2-piece set, which, as I mentioned previously, it increases the drain of our quantum phase torpedo under torpedo spread. Then the Domino console, which is a firing cycle buff and Cat 2 damage buff and bridge officer recharge speed buff, which is pretty nice. All right, so that's it for the loadout section. Let's have a look at the skill tree right now. And this is a fairly standard tactical ultimate skill tree. Of note, 3 points in tactical readiness and 2 points in engineering readiness, as well as full points in advanced long-range targeting sensors, a little bit of EPG, as well as you'll note that I did also take full control, or rather full drain expertise as well, and 2 points of hull capacity. Nothing in shields because normally I've been running emitter-linked phasers, but this is what the skill tree looks like for this build. So let's move on to the traits right now. Personal space traits, I'll just run through these. This one is a bit of an all-round debuff and a bit of experimenting going on with it. Beam training. Context is for kings. Now, most of the time on this one, it is going to be a damage resistance buff because we are going to be taking damage. Blade of Shell. Fleet Coordinator. Grace Under Fire, which completely resets the cooldown of our Miraculous Repairs ability. Terran Targeting Systems for critical severity. Self-modulating fire. And Repair Crews. Starship trait-wise, attack pattern Delta Prime, and this modifies our attack pattern Delta. And you'll probably note that this is hilariously expensive today, but it wasn't in the past when I got it. And when this activates and we're using Delta, this is 15% critical chance and 37.5% critical severity. So it stacks up quite a bit whenever Delta is active. So that makes Delta a very important buff for us. Calm Before the Storm, combined with Attrition Warfare of our secondary specialization, is what this build uses for managing cooldown. So that's why Calm Before the Storm is there. Plus we also get some nice weapon haste buffs as well with that. And as I mentioned, combines with Attrition Warfare, and that pretty much handles cooldowns. Emergency Weapon Cycle reduces weapon power cost and increases haste. Redirecting arrays, which is pretty much a no-brainer, running fire at will and a tank. Then finally, history. Well, remember, this just provides us an all damage buff, improves hull regen, and provides extra threat generation. And you'll note that this stacks up to 30 times. And whenever you're a tank and you're getting hit, that's something you definitely want. Reputation-wise, Nukara, Aux Power Offense, Energy Frequencer for healing, Magnified Firepower, Critical Chance from Romulan, and Advanced Targeting Systems from the Iconian setup. Now, duty officer-wise, as this is a tank, just a couple of energy weapons officers to get a crit severity buff when firing energy weapons. These could maybe be changed to critical chance, depending on your cup of tea, but I think we have enough critical chance as it is on this build. Emergency con officer to reset the evasive maneuvers cooldown. A security officer to increase threat gen when we're running attack pattern delta. So there's the trifecta of attack pattern delta. This bridge officer that improves threat gen combined with attack pattern delta prime makes delta attack pattern delta a linchpin of this build. Fabrication engineer increases the duration of reverse shield polarity. And a nurse, which is just a flat 15% hull regeneration. And this stacks with many other sources. And there's some questions about when I complete the discovery reputation on this character, whether or not adding in that 2-piece discovery set for 150% extra hull regeneration might be something to look at. So now I think the question comes up, how exactly do you fly this thing as a tank? Well, in general, your goal as a tank is to have a combination of DPS, threat generation, and survivability. You need enough DPS that, combined with sources of threat generation such as the Embassy Console, Attract Fire, Attack Pattern Delta, and Threatening Stance, you're going to have enemies that will want to attack you. You also need enough survivability at the same time that they don't crush you. But if your DPS is too low, you'll be a hindrance on your team, or the enemies won't target you and will target someone else. The right ratio of these, I find, is largely personal, and it depends on what content you're trying to tank. So while this setup on this ship works for me, it might not work for you. Now, the run you're about to see saw 117k DPS with 85% attacks in. These numbers are good. The attacks in could go a bit higher with personal practice and a more cohesive team. And oftentimes when you're building a tank, attacks in is the more interesting number to look at than DPS. So let's have a look at the run right now. All right, so we're back, and here's the Parse. As you can see, our phaser beam arrays did 51k under fire at well 3. They're 13k when they were just firing. Quantum phase transfer, that's the shield drain right there, 6k DPS, and the spread did 3.4, so that's 9k just from one torpedo. We also had someone in there running concentrate firepower, which helped us a bit. And you'll, of course, note here at the pets, if we take a look at those, 24k DPS throughout that entire run. I've seen them go higher, so these pets are actually doing quite a good job on that. And before we move on, to sum up, I'll just point out this stat here on this run, 85% attacks in and 75% of the damage in. So you can see here that this did fulfill its role of a tank. And I guess since this is a tank, we should also have a look at the heal abilities as well that we used here. So the restorative protomatter matrix, our console gave us 1.73k heals per second, energy refrequencer 1.1. Then next up was miraculous repairs, and then everything else from there trickles down: ablative shell, ox to sif, hazard emitters, and engineering team at the end. So there we have it. There's the build and the run. And as we said, we normally don't do these energy weapon builds, but I figured it was interesting as this ship is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing that will be coming out. So I thought we might as well have a bit of a talk about it and the concept of a miracle worker tank. So hopefully you found this video useful. And if you want more, like and subscribe, and maybe we'll be back doing more of these in the Discovery Miracle Worker flight deck cruiser, or maybe we'll just go back to science. We'll have to wait and see. But see you next time, everyone.